I never thought my life could unravel in a single sun-drenched afternoon. I'm Emily, a graphic designer whose world was once made of quiet routines and the comforting hum of deadlines, married to Jack, a man whose heart belongs to the baseball field. 12 years of marriage had woven us into a familiar, if faded, tapestry, until the day I sat on those dusty bleachers, watching him play, and a stranger's voice cut through the crowd like a blade. It was a moment that sparked something dangerous inside me. A flicker of forbidden curiosity that threatened to burn everything I'd built to ashes. What happened next changed my life forever. But at what cost? Picture this: the faint hum of a lawnmower in the distance, the smell of fresh coffee lingering in the air, and me, staring at a blank screen, waiting for inspiration to strike like a rogue lightning bolt. I'm Emily, 39 years old, and I've carved out a quiet little life for myself as a freelance graphic designer. My world is made of deadlines, color palettes, and the soft glow of my laptop late at night. I've been married to Jack for 12 years now. He's 41, a man whose heart beats for the crack of a bat and the roar of a crowd. Baseball isn't just a hobby for him. It's woven into his very soul. Every weekend, he's out there on the field, chasing that rush, while I'm usually hunched over my desk, tweaking designs for clients who always seem to want just one more change. Our marriage? Well, it's like a well-worn sweater. Comfortable, familiar, but maybe a little frayed at the edges. We've settled into a rhythm, a routine that works, even if it lacks the spark of our early days. Jack's often gone for practice or games, and I'm fine with that. I've never been one for baseball, honestly. The rules confuse me, the games drag on, and I'd rather spend my Saturdays sketching than cheering from the bleachers. But I try to be supportive. I show up when I can, smile through the small talk with other spouses, and nod along when Jack recounts every play with the enthusiasm of a kid on Christmas morning. It's what you do when you love someone, right? You meet them halfway, even if halfway is a dusty field under a scorching sun. Jack talks a lot about the director of his team, this larger-than-life figure who seems to command respect without even trying. I haven't met the guy yet, but from the way Jack describes him, you'd think he's some kind of baseball guru, a leader who can turn a ragtag group of amateurs into something unstoppable. Jack's admiration for him is palpable, and I can't help but wonder what kind of person inspires that kind of loyalty. I guess I'll find out eventually. This particular Saturday started like most others. I was sipping my second cup of coffee, half listening to the radio, when Jack burst into the kitchen, his energy practically bouncing off the walls. "Em, you've got to come to practice today," he said, his eyes bright with that boyish excitement I've always found hard to resist. "The team's in top form, and I really want you there. Please." There was a pleading edge to his voice, and I felt that familiar tug of obligation. I wanted to say no, to curl up with my sketch pad instead, but the look on his face, how could I refuse? So I sighed, offered a small smile, and nodded. "Sure, Jack, I'll come." Inside, though, my mind was already wandering. I'd be a good wife, I told myself. Show up, clap when everyone else does, and maybe sneak in a few pages of the novel tucked into my bag. So, after finishing my coffee, I grabbed my keys, slipped on a pair of sunglasses, and headed out to our old sedan parked in the driveway. The engine sputtered a bit as I turned the key, but it roared to life soon enough, and I was on my way to the baseball field, the sun blazing overhead like a relentless spotlight. The sky was a perfect, endless blue, not a cloud in sight, and the heat was already creeping through the cracked window, sticking to my skin. As I pulled into the gravel lot near the bleachers, the faint, earthy scent of freshly cut grass hit me, mingling with the dust kicked up by other cars. It was a smell that always reminded me of these weekends, of Jack's world, so different from my own. I parked and stepped out, slinging my bag over my shoulder as I made my way toward the stands. A small crowd was already there, scattered across the rows, mostly family and friends, I figured, with their folding chairs and coolers, chatting and laughing under the shade of worn-out caps. I scanned the bleachers and spotted an empty spot right in the front row, perfect for a clear view of the field. I settled in, the metal seat cool against my legs for now, though I knew it'd heat up soon enough under that unforgiving sun. Down on the field, I could see Jack warming up with his teammates, his uniform a crisp white with red trim, the number 17 stitched across his back. He was laughing with a couple of the guys, tossing a ball back and forth, completely in his element. His grin was wide, carefree, like he didn't have a single worry in the world out there. Watching him, I felt a little twinge in my chest, a mix of affection and something softer, even if I couldn't quite muster the same excitement for the game. He loved this, and that was enough for me to be here, even if I'd rather be anywhere else. I pulled out my book, some mystery novel I'd been meaning to finish for weeks, and flipped it open, hoping to kill some time. But I barely got through a paragraph before the sounds of the field pulled me back. The sharp crack of a bat, the shouts of encouragement, the rhythmic thud of cleats on dirt. I sighed, setting the book down on my lap, and let my eyes drift to the game as it started. I didn't really get the rules, not beyond the basics, but I tried to follow along, squinting at the players as they moved across the diamond. When Jack stepped up to the plate about 10 minutes in, I straightened up a bit, watching as he swung and sent the ball sailing into the outfield. The crowd around me cheered, and I joined in, clapping with a half-hearted smile, more for him than for the play itself. He glanced up at the stands, catching my eye for just a second, and I gave a little wave, hoping he could see I was here for him. That's when I felt someone settle into the seat beside me, the bleacher creaking slightly under their weight. I didn't think much of it at first. People were coming and going after all. But then a voice, deep and smooth like aged whiskey, broke through the noise of the crowd. "You must be Emily. Jack's told me a lot about you." I turned my head, and there he was, a man in a tailored suit, looking out of place among the casual caps and t-shirts of the other spectators. His presence was magnetic, like he owned the very air around him. His dark hair was neatly combed back, a few streaks of silver at the temples giving him an air of authority, and his piercing gray eyes seemed to see right through me. I felt a jolt, a mix of curiosity and unease as I managed a polite smile. "That's me. And you are?" He extended a hand, his grip firm and warm. "I'm Richard, the director of Jack's team. It's a pleasure to finally meet the woman behind the man." His voice carried a weight, a charisma that made my skin prickle. I'd heard Jack mention Richard countless times, always with this reverence, like he was some kind of legend. And now, here he was, sitting next to me, his attention fully on me instead of the game. I couldn't help but feel a little starstruck, knowing how much Jack looked up to him. This was the guy who shaped the team, who turned passion into victories, and his aura was undeniable. Commanding, confident, the kind of person who could walk into any room and own it without trying. We exchanged a few pleasantries about the weather and the team's performance, his words laced with an easy charm that drew me in despite myself. But then, without any warning, the conversation shifted in a way I never saw coming. His tone dropped lower, almost intimate, as he reached over and gently took my hand. My breath hitched, my body freezing as he guided my hand to rest on his thigh, his touch deliberate, firm, sending a shockwave through me. I couldn't move, couldn't think, as his fingers lingered over mine for just a moment too long before pulling away. My heart slammed against my ribs, and when I dared to meet his gaze, his eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my stomach twist in knots. It was like he could see every thought racing through my mind, every flicker of doubt and confusion. "Emily," he said, leaning in just enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath. "Why don't you join me for a coffee in my office? I've got an aquarium there with some rare fish I think you'd find captivating." His words hung in the air, heavy with implication, and I felt my cheeks flush, my mind scrambling to process what was happening. Coffee. An aquarium. It sounded innocent enough on the surface, but the way he said it, the way his eyes never left mine, made it clear there was more beneath the invitation. My throat went dry, and I couldn't find my voice for a moment, trapped between the weight of his stare and the chaos in my head. I should have pulled away right then and there. I should have said no, made some excuse, and stayed rooted to the bleachers, cheering for Jack like the loyal wife I was supposed to be. But I didn't. Part of me, a part I didn't want to acknowledge, was intrigued, even flattered. Richard was powerful, magnetic, the kind of man who could command attention without effort, and here he was, focusing all of that on me. Me, the graphic designer who spent most of her days in sweatpants, buried in Photoshop layers. It was intoxicating, dangerous, and wrong. So very wrong. I glanced down at the field, catching sight of Jack in the middle of a play, completely oblivious to the storm brewing just a few rows above him. My chest tightened with guilt, a sharp pang that cut through the haze of temptation. He trusted me. He'd brought me here to share in his passion. As I sat there on the bleachers, the weight of Richard's invitation pressing down on me, I felt the world tilt just a little. My mind was a tangled mess of guilt and curiosity, but somehow I found myself nodding, mumbling a shaky, "Okay, sure." His smile widened, a glint of something unreadable in his gray eyes, and before I knew it, I was following him away from the field, away from Jack, away from the life I knew. My heart pounded like a drum in my chest, each step feeling heavier than the last as we made our way to his car parked just beyond the lot. It was a sleek, black sedan, the kind that screamed money and power, and as I slid into the passenger seat, the leather cool against my skin, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping into something I wouldn't be able to walk away from. The engine hummed to life, a low, steady purr that filled the silence between us. Richard drove with an effortless confidence, one hand on the wheel, the other resting casually on the gear shift. He started making small talk, his voice smooth and calm, as if this was the most normal thing in the world. He chatted about the team, mentioning how Jack had been improving, how the guys were shaping up for the season. I nodded along, forcing a smile, but my hands wouldn't stop fidgeting in my lap. I twisted my fingers together, picking at a loose thread on my jeans, trying to focus on his words instead of the storm raging inside me. Every now and then, I'd catch him glancing my way, his eyes lingering just a second too long, and it sent a shiver down my spine that I couldn't ignore. The hum of the engine seemed to match the rhythm of my racing pulse, a constant reminder that I was in too deep, that I should have stayed on those bleachers, cheering for my husband. The drive felt both endless and too short, like time was playing tricks on me. Before I knew it, we were pulling up to a modern building on the edge of town, all glass and steel, towering over the surrounding area like it didn't belong. Richard parked smoothly in a reserved spot near the entrance, and as we stepped out, the hot afternoon air hit me, a stark contrast to the chilled interior of the car. He led me through a quiet lobby, our footsteps echoing on the polished marble floor. There was no one around, not even a security guard, just an eerie stillness that made my nerves jangle even more. We reached an elevator at the far end, and as the doors slid open with a soft ding, I hesitated for just a moment. Richard noticed, turning to me with that same disarming smile. "After you, Emily," he said, his voice a low murmur that seemed to pull me forward despite myself. I stepped inside, the mirrored walls reflecting my tense expression back at me. And he followed, pressing the button for the top floor. The ride up was silent. The only sound the faint whir of the elevator as it climbed. I could feel the heat of his presence beside me, the space between us charged with something I couldn't name. My reflection stared back at me, wide-eyed and uncertain, and I wondered what Jack would think if he could see me now. The guilt gnawed at me, sharp and relentless, but it was drowned out by the strange pull of anticipation, the unknown waiting just beyond those elevator doors. When they finally opened, we stepped into a long, dimly lit hallway, the carpet plush underfoot, leading to a set of double doors at the end. Richard pushed them open with a casual ease, revealing a spacious office that took my breath away. It was luxurious in a way I'd never seen up close. Floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city below, the skyline glittering under the late afternoon sun. A massive mahogany desk dominated the center of the room, polished to a mirror shine, and behind it sat a leather chair that looked more like a throne. But what caught my eye most was the aquarium he'd mentioned, a stunning wall of glass filled with exotic fish, their scales shimmering in vibrant hues of turquoise, gold, and crimson under soft, ambient lights. I'm sitting here now, days after everything unraveled, and I can still feel the weight of that moment in Richard's office pressing down on me like a stone. I gave in to temptation, let myself get swept up in the heat of his gaze and the allure of something forbidden. What happened behind those closed doors, under the glow of that aquarium, was a betrayal I never thought I'd be capable of. A stolen moment of weakness that I can't undo, no matter how much I wish I could. It was a dance of shadows and whispers, a crossing of lines that left me breathless and ashamed, knowing full well the cost if Jack ever found out. But in that haze, I didn't think about consequences. I didn't think about cameras or recordings. I just fell. Now back in the quiet of our home, I'm trying to piece myself together, to act like nothing's changed, but everything has. Every time I catch Jack's eye across the kitchen table, guilt claws at my insides, sharp and relentless. I force a smile, ask him about his day, but my voice feels hollow, like it belongs to someone else. The house itself feels different, heavier somehow, as if the walls know what I've done and are holding their breath, waiting for the truth to spill out. Jack's quieter than usual, his usual chatter about the team replaced with long silences. I tell myself it's just stress, maybe work's piling up, or the team's hitting a rough patch. I cling to that excuse, desperate to believe it's not about me, that he doesn't suspect a thing. But deep down, I know I'm lying to myself. I can feel the distance growing between us, a chasm I don't know how to bridge. I spend my days tiptoeing around him, overcompensating with small gestures, cooking his favorite meals, leaving little notes on the fridge, anything to ease the tension I sense but can't name. I'm hyper-aware of every move I make, every word I say, terrified that one wrong step will shatter the fragile normalcy I'm trying to maintain. At night, I lie awake next to him, staring at the ceiling while his steady breathing fills the room. My mind replays that day in Richard's office over and over, a loop I can't escape, each memory laced with regret so bitter it burns. I want to confess, to let it all pour out and beg for forgiveness, but the words stick in my throat. How do you even start a conversation like that? How do you tell the person you love most that you've broken their trust in the worst way? Then came the evening that changed everything. I was in the living room, pretending to focus on a design project, my laptop screen a blur of colors I couldn't process. The front door opened, and Jack walked in, his footsteps heavier than usual. I looked up, expecting to see the familiar tired but warm expression he usually wears after a long day. Instead, his face was pale, almost ghostly, his eyes red-rimmed and raw, like he'd been fighting back tears for hours. My stomach dropped, a cold dread settling in as I watched him move past me without a word, heading straight for our bedroom. I called after him, my voice shaky, asking if everything was okay, but he didn't answer. Panic surged through me, and I scrambled to my feet, following him down the hall, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. When I reached the bedroom, I froze in the doorway. Jack was standing by the bed, a suitcase open in front of him, his hands moving mechanically as he folded shirts and tossed them inside. My mind couldn't process it at first. Why was he packing? Where was he going? I stepped closer, my voice trembling as I asked, "Jack, what's happening? Talk to me, please." He didn't look at me right away, just kept packing, his movements jerky, like he was barely holding himself together. Then he stopped, his hands gripping the edge of the suitcase, and turned to face me. The pain in his eyes hit me like a punch, raw and unguarded, and when he spoke, his voice broke as he said, "I can't do this anymore. It's been weeks since that gut-wrenching night when Jack walked out, leaving behind a void that echoes through every corner of this house. I'm alone now, surrounded by the ghosts of a life we built together over 12 years. The silence is deafening, heavier than I ever imagined it could be. I wander through the rooms, my footsteps the only sound on the hardwood floors, and I can't help but notice the little things. His favorite mug still sitting on the counter, the dent in the couch where he used to sprawl out after a long day, the faint scent of his cologne that lingers on a jacket he forgot to pack. It's like the house is holding on to him, even if I can't. Sometimes I catch myself pausing at the front door, half expecting to hear the jingle of his keys or see his familiar silhouette step through. But the door stays shut, and I'm left with the bitter truth. He's not coming back. I've heard whispers through mutual friends that he's moved to another city, trying to piece together a fresh start far away from the wreckage I caused. I haven't reached out, haven't even considered it. What could I possibly say? There are no words to mend what's been broken, no apologies deep enough to erase the hurt I saw in his eyes that final night. I keep my distance, letting the miles between us grow, knowing that silence is the kindest thing I can offer him now. It's not just Jack, though. Richard called me once after everything fell apart, his voice smooth as ever over the phone, suggesting we meet up again, as if what happened in his office could be revisited like some casual coffee date. I could hear the expectation in his tone, the assumption that I'd be eager to fall back into that dangerous thrill. But I shut it down, my voice firm as I told him no. I'm not naive enough to think I meant anything more to him than a fleeting distraction, a notch on his belt of conquests. I won't let myself be that, not again. Sitting here now, in the dim light of the living room, I've had endless hours to turn over every choice, every moment that led to this solitude. The pain I've caused Jack cuts deep, a wound that festers every time I think of his broken expression as he packed his suitcase. I'm not blind to the devastation I've left in my wake, the trust I shattered with a single reckless decision. And yet, as much as it stings to admit, I don't regret what I did. I can't. That stolen encounter with Richard, under the shimmering glow of his aquarium, ignited something in me I didn't even know was dormant. It wasn't just about the heat of the moment, the forbidden rush of crossing a line I never thought I'd dare to cross. It was more than that. It was a wake-up call, a jolt that shook me out of the numb routine I'd been sleepwalking through for years. My life with Jack, as comfortable as it was, had become a cage of predictability, a cycle of mundane days where I felt more like a shadow of myself than a person with desires, with fire. That day, I felt alive in a way I hadn't in so long, even if it came at the cost of everything I held dear. I'm not proud of hurting Jack. I'll carry the weight of his pain for the rest of my life, a scar on my conscience that won't fade. But I can't bring myself to apologize for choosing me, for reaching for something beyond the safe, stifling walls of the life I'd settled into. Maybe that makes me selfish. Maybe it makes me a villain in someone else's story. But I've spent too long shrinking myself to fit into a mold that never quite suited me. That moment of weakness, or strength, depending on how you look at it, cracked open a door I didn't even know was there. It showed me I'm capable of wanting more, of chasing a spark even if it burns everything down in the process. The cost was steep, steeper than I ever imagined, but I can't turn back time, and I wouldn't if I could. I've lost my husband. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.